Welcome back to It's a Mimic, where you never know what you're gonna get. Today, we're continuing our mini-series on Drow in Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition. I'm Megan, and I'm lurking through the Underdark with both Pepperina and Casey, while we look at some of the more elite members of the Drow Society.
With everything changing as D&D 5th edition gets the 2024 updates, it's important we don't lose any lore or details that previous editions had to offer. However, even as we pour over everything Drow from 5th edition, it's also important to understand the problematic nature of some of the Drow history. So make sure you listen to episode 0 of this series and keep it all in mind.
In this episode, this panel of Dungeon Masters is going to dig into the Drow who can lead the squads of regular Drow or stand on their own as a boss fight at the end of Tier 1.
All right, so just as a quick reminder that all Drow have the following details in their stat blocks unless otherwise stated. This is something that we're going to be going over, so we just like to make sure that folks who are tuning in now just make sure that they get to get a feel for what regular Drow are. So as a reminder, they are medium humanoids, but they're shorter than most humans. They're typically evil if they follow Lolth and the other gods, which most do. They move 30 feet, have 120-foot dark vision, and speak Elvish and Undercommon. It seems weird to mention the 120-foot distance of dark vision, but we've noted in a few episodes already that a few minions or XYZ have a shorter dark vision, which I think is something that people need to keep in mind, especially since we're lurking in the Underdark here. Most are known for their agility and hardiness, but they tend to be slightly stronger and have more mental stats than the average human. They're known for being hard to sneak up on, as well as being sneaky themselves. We always tend to speak roguelike and or assassin-esque. They have advantage on saving throws against being charmed, and they can't be put to sleep magically. That comes from the whole Fey ancestry, so just make sure you remember that, of course, we are talking about elves and their Fey ancestry history here. If they're in the sunlight, they have disadvantage on attacks and perception rolls that use their sight, and they can cast dancing lights at will, and once per day they can cast darkness and fairy fire. And of course, the higher the CR, the higher the numerical stats will be.
Yeah.
You're very welcome.
Beautiful.
All right, let's kick off chatting about some of our leads.
So every Drow house will have their own house captain. This is one of the jobs that males of the community can hold, and is usually this responsibility is given to the first or second oldest son of the house. They are in charge of commanding the house's army. That is their whole job in life. And they have spent much of their lives studying combat tactics and techniques to prepare for this role. And I think that really kind of shows up in some of their stats. These are a CR of 9 and have around 162 hit points. So they're quite beefy. Like we said, all of their stats are a bit above average. Their lowest is intelligence and charisma, getting a +1. Their highest is dex with a +4. And like most Drow, they get the Fey ancestry, the sunlight sensitivity, the spell casting, all of that fun stuff. But their unique trait is actually a bonus action that they can do. The Drow can target one ally it can see within 30 feet. If the target can see or hear them, the Drow that it's targeting can use its reaction to make one melee attack or take the dodge or hide action. So they give a little boost to their friends there in battle. For actions, they have a multi-attack, and they get 3 attacks with that. 2 with the scimitar, and 1 with either his hand whip or crossbow. The scimitar is a +8 to hit with 1d6 +4 slashing damage, plus 4d6 poison damage. The whip is +8 to hit also, with a 10-foot range. It does 1d4 +4 slashing damage, and if the target is an ally, they have advantage on attack rolls until the end of their next turn. So they can use that against their allies, but give them a boost. And the hand crossbow has a +8 to hit and has hand crossbow range, and does 1d6 +4 piercing damage. The target must make a con save or be poisoned for 1 hour. If the saving throw fails by 5 or more, the target is unconscious. They gain consciousness if they take damage or if another creature takes an action to shake them. And finally, they get a reaction of parry. They can add 3 to their AC against 1 melee attack that would hit them. They must see the attacker and be holding a melee weapon.
Nice.
So that's it. That's the house captains.
How very fun. I feel
Yeah.
like they definitely scream like, again, oldest son energy.
Yeah.
Awesome. All right, let's raise some dice and let's answer some questions for our first round today.
6.
All right.
Starting off
12.
There
I rolled-
always has to be the 12 roll. This is
I
the
know it fits.
And
I rolled
the 12.
I rolled a 15 though, so I will take the lead on this one, my friends. So first we'll talk about the role-playing aspect in terms of the utilization of the house captain. I do like the fact that it is tied into their family lineage, of the fact that this is one of the only roles that men can hold within the household, as well as it is given and bestowed upon like the oldest son. I like how it does say sometimes the secondary son. I
Mhm.
wonder if there's some family politics and dynamics that we can play into here, and the fact that like the second son might have been born a little bit more with more strength or more viciousness, and the oldest son had a little bit more of that diplomatic feel, so they actually switch roles. And then what that kind of family dynamic looks like in terms of the mother, the rest of the daughters, and so on and so forth. Like as we like to say, we Bridgerton the shit out of this. I'm just imagining those internal family politics that makes that
Mhm.
shift happen of which son gets, or say you have twin drows, like two twins, like which one gets to be the house captain, right? Do you make them battle the death for it? Like, I just feel like that's a huge thing that you can play on. And the fact that like, if you come in as a player, walk into a household of drow and the house captain introduces themselves, and then there's a drow right behind them, just basically just saying, remember that you're the second oldest. Like, right? Like,
Yeah.
it's just like a remember your place, but also fuck you, right? So
Yeah.
I think that would be a fun role-playing thing to act with.
Yeah. And I think like with that, it would be like the second son would have that animosity that like they were born second and would have to like fight tooth and nail to get to the top of that. So if you are using the second son, I think it would be a vastly different role playing than the first son, because the first son, it's given to them. The second son has to earn it.
Mhm.
So like considering that in your role playing, and just like how much cockier they would have to be and how much more they would have to fight for it and how much more brutal they would have to be to prove themselves.
Mhm. I went to Game of Thrones when I was thinking about this because
Mhm.
all of like the kings well, we'll say it's the kings because it was all having all the bastards. So what if the
Yeah.
first son born was a bastard? And they got rid of it, or like, sent it off to like be raised somewhere else. But then, come adulthood, somebody leaks that, the house captain is actually not the firstborn son. And it's like, what are you talking about? And then there's this whole reveal of finding the firstborn son, who is actually like an incredibly elite warrior, where the secondborn son is like, yeah, more of a diplomat or more of a feeler and very like meek. And it's like, what has happened here? This shouldn't be what the firstborn son is like. It's like, well, he's not the firstborn son.
Yeah.
The drama that
The drama.
Yeah. Or like rival houses has the two sons of one born drow that like one runs one house, one runs the other house. And thanks for the thumbs up, Casey.
Zoom.
Oh, Atlanta. For exploration on these ones, I feel like you're not necessarily gonna like track them. You're also not gonna be looking for them, you know what I mean? And I feel like if you needed to know who the head of the household was, it would be very obvious and very apparent. One, they would probably have their own guards. So the head of the house, this house captain, would probably have their own either spider minions or something that stays beside them to keep them protected, right? They would also be extremely overly protective of their sisters and the women of the household. I feel like that's a good dynamic to kind of lead into, like that if you're speaking to one of the drow women and you're off the cuff or say something, he's going to be the first one to tell you, mind your manners. You are in somebody else's household, right? So if you are looking for who the captain in the house is, that's good exploration tip, is that they're the one that's going to react to how you're treating the people within their household.
Yeah. And I think like if you're trying to get into a drow like house to speak to like the mother matron or whatever, you're not just gonna get right to them, you know,
Yeah.
you're gonna have to go through this house captain first. Like if you are like, I need to speak to this matron mother, like, okay, hold on. That's not how this works.
Yeah.
And you will be brought to this house captain, and this house captain will vet you and if you are worthy to make it any further.
Completely agree. And I went to Lord of the Rings with this one in like, you know, if you're going into a battle and like say multiple houses are rallying together to fight one common enemy, we'll say. The house captain would be the one on the lizard, like walking with their house army and, you know, towering above in like a upper status. I think it would be, like we were talking about, very clear that they are not the same as the army itself. They would have much more elaborate armor and be that, you know, like captain of the King's Guard style or like the king of the realm style. So yeah, I want him to ride a lizard.
Oh yeah, they would definitely have like the lizard, the giant lizards as their mounts.
Absolutely.
100%. Yeah. Dragon lizard as mount, and then of course, like I think in the previous episode we talked about the fact that they would have like certain houses have like higher quality like giant lizard mounts. Oh man, I love it so much. Just on a giant lizard mount, and then have 2 spiders beside him, just like the whole 9 yards, right? Like
Absolutely.
I love it. Whole procession of just weird monsters.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness. For combat, they're built for combat. Like if you read their stat block and like what Pepperina explained, like they are written as leaders of an army and very combative. But I do like the idea that like there would be more meeker house captains, and I say the word meeker lightly, but more diplomatic and charismatic, because like all drow have high charisma. There's no reason why you couldn't have like a more of a diplomat, and I feel like that would almost be like a play for a house to have more of a, not one who goes into battle themselves, but did the research, has the knowledge, and is able to give defenses from a stance of knowledge and like charisma, if that makes sense. But you know, they're definitely just going to be like whipping people left, right, and center, you know what I mean? Like we're talking about the drow here. I feel like you're just going to be like, if you talk out of turn, you're going to get a slash across the wrist, right? Like that's kind of just how I feel. And like especially if you're looking at how they're probably training, and the trainers of some of the folks that are like guarding this family, they're going to want them to be as strong as possible because stature and status mean something, right? So I for combat tactics, I'm more thinking about the training of their actual household army and how brutal it would be.
Yeah.
So if you go out into the fields where they're training and you get a glimpse at drow training their household armies, it would be a brutal sight because their stat block is built to be aggressive. So that I feel is where they're going to see most of that happen unless you are on a battlefield, right? So,
yeah. And I think like you brought up the like whipping as part of their training, and that really makes sense with the ability to boost their allies with the whip. Like that is, they have trained for this moment. They know it is coming. Like that is what gets them motivated. Like however they have been trained in their lives, that is what motivates them to do better on their turn. So I would definitely see them using that, like they hit twice with the scimitar and then they whip the next drow that is in line in initiative to give them a boost for their next attack.
Yeah. And it's just like we attack and then we attack each other to motivate each other loop, right?
Yeah. Because like the captain does not care that the person below them got damaged. They just want them to hit the enemy
as hard as they can and be afraid of, I will hurt you more if you don't hurt them.
Yes.
Yeah.
So like that, I think that's probably one of the most telling parts of their stat block and how they're trained and work.
Yeah. And I think because of that and because of their ancestry and because of their like the status of the house captain, if you were to defeat and destroy one, it would cause a like significant rift in like the house dynamics and your like position. So I feel like its armor or like its helmet or whatever would be something that you would loot and take with you, and like you'd start, you know, a trophy room of of like which house captains you have destroyed. And I think that would then also become something that you could use for intimidation when you're like negotiating with other houses, going, well, we all know what happened with this house captain, and like you have like the helmet with you. So I think if you were to try and look at it from like what it doesn't means, not only to like beat the army, but if you kill the house captain, the ramifications of that, and then the level up that you or your party gets for doing that, given the history that that position has.
Yeah, absolutely. Awesome. All right. Well, that is the house captain. What do we have next, fam?
Well, we're going to now talk about who the house captain whips. The elite warriors. And these truly are not the image of slaves. They are the army itself. And so you can find details about the elite warrior in the monster manual. And we spoke before in this series about like the noble houses having their own armies. And like, honestly, this is what they are. And now we know that they would be led by a house captain, but an elite warrior defends their house and their superiors against everything. There is nothing they won't do to protect them. And they can be male or female. And it's also noted that they specialize in fighting dwarves, gnomes, and elves, including drow. So I think this speaks to also like the house captain whipping thing. I think that would translate into them also, like if a fellow drow is going against their house or from another house, they will not faze them to try to destroy them. Also, I think they would like mimic that sort of violent encouragement from the house captain amongst each other, even because they know their own weaknesses. They are also part of the Drow legions that would go to the surface and raid and return with either prisoners or loot or whatever they were getting. So the elite warrior wears studded leather and carries a shield to increase their AC to 18. And they have a hit point average of 71, which is much lower than the house captain. They are skilled in perception, though, and stealth, and have saving throw scores of +7 for dex, +5 for con, and +4 for wisdom. They are a CR of 5. In addition to darkness and fairy fire, they can also cast levitate on itself only once per day. And yeah, they're warriors. So it's no surprise that they have multi-attack to make 2 short sword attacks with +7 to hit, dealing 1d6 +4 piercing damage, which is interesting, short sword attack, but it says piercing damage. So they are stabby stab. And then you also get 3d6 poison damage on a hit to one target within a 5-foot reach. They also carry a hand crossbow that has the same +7 to hit, but deals 1d6 +4 piercing damage and causes the target to make a DC 13 con save or be poisoned for 1 hour. If you fail this by 5 or more, you are also unconscious. We've seen this a little bit already. The target will wake up if it takes more damage or another creature uses its action to shake it awake. Finally, the elite warrior has a reaction ability called parry. It adds 3 to its AC, which would make it 21, against 1 melee attack that would hit it. They must be able to see the attacker and be wielding a short sword. Yeah, so they are army fighters, and they will not stop until their foes are destroyed. And because they're drow, their attacks and their weapons have poison damage. And yeah, they will be following the captain, the house captain.
Yeah. I think it's a good thing to mention too, in the fact that like we're going to start talking about a lot of the minions and other roles that in the drow group. And we talked in a previous episode about the fact that they have a large knowledge of poison. So I feel like it should just be like mentally ingrained in us that like there will be poison damage somewhere when it comes to most of these drow. And it's interesting that they've done it where they've added it to different aspects of them, right? Usually it's the tipped crossbow. But if you have a sword or something like that, I feel like you could almost tip your sword with it, right?
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Anyways, let's roll again. 9.
16.
Oh my God. 3.
Great. All right, Peps, you're up first. Let's chat roleplay.
I see them sort of like the army of the, or is it, Unsullied Game of Thrones?
Yeah, the
Like they're,
Unsullied.
yeah, they're very much that. Like that is their entire purpose in life, is to be a soldier, and they are good soldiers, and they are very well trained, and they do what they're told. And so like that's how I would use them. They're not gonna have a ton of personality to talk to them, they're not gonna be like super charismatic. They are gonna be a soldier, and like, this is the plan. This is what we do. Like, if you're not talking to me about our next battle, I don't care what you're saying.
Yeah.
Move along.
Absolutely. I like the fact that they mentioned that women Drow and men Drow can both be within this elite system of warriors.
Mhm.
I would love to have that role play interaction, or one of those storylines where, of course, there's one of the daughters of a house that wants to be in the house guard and become an elite warrior, but their mother matron is like, no daughters of mine are actually going to be within the house guard. Like, we can take other daughters from other houses, but my own daughters will not be in our house guard, kind of thing. And then what that would do to that family dynamic, again, in terms of like, these women are like, no, we want to fight for our household. Why would we not be allowed to? And then the mother's trying to warn them, it is a brutal place to be. That is no place for women. Again, Bridgerton, the shit out of it. Like, it's not a place for women. And then what happens there, right? And then I can see it being like, if you wanted to have a backstory for a Drow character that you're building, your character ends up in the guard, go up for a raid, and then you get taken or lost, right? And then now you're on the surface and having to figure out how to either get back home or what have you, right? Like, that would be a really cool little one shot to do, or a good character backstory to have.
It
Yeah.
was giving me Mulan vibes, as you were
It
saying.
does, yeah. Like, let me slice off my hair.
Yeah. And I was just thinking about because it's so ingrained in them to like worship and follow Lolth. And there may be one other aspect to that, in the sense of this entire army will have zero tolerance for anybody who does not follow Lolth. So I feel like they may even be given the direction to like kill anyone that you encounter that does not follow Lolth. So if you were to, get the attention of an army of raiders on the surface, and you can't, you fail your persuasion on saying, oh no, we like Lolth. Lolth is great. He's our guy. She's our girl. And they're like, no, there's no, like Peps was saying, there's no real discussion and negotiation. It's the second they see we are dealing with people who do not follow Lolth, it's instantly initiative and a combat, because they will just destroy. Like, it's so ingrained in them. So they don't know anything else. That's just what they know, and that's what they do. It's like autopilot.
Yeah, because it's wisdom that you use to find out if, what is it again? Like, it's your what brain figure out the words that you're trying to say. They have a +4 to their wisdom, which means that they will see through your bullshit if you're trying to prove verbally that you believe in Lolth and you have no idea who Lolth is. They're going to be like,
yeah.
I mean, it does technically fall under perception, but isn't there? Because what is it? Perception, deception.
There's
And
insight.
Insight is the one I was trying to think of. That's wisdom. That's the one. That's the word I couldn't find.
Insight. Yes.
Insight check.
Yeah, that's a good point. I truly don't think they'll be easily fooled, even though they are like unsullied in the sense they only know one thing and they will do it to the perfect degree. That does not mean that they're just dumb army, they know it because they are very wise, and they understand why they're doing it. They understand the lore, and so there's nothing you can do to dissuade them from that, really.
Yeah, they're skilled, trained, and educated. These aren't again, I'm thinking of Mulan. These aren't your arborers and XYZs that are being added to a combat and army. These are trained warriors, right?
Mm-hmm.
So they're I feel like, especially because they're Drow and they have that high charisma and high wisdom, high intelligence area, and that mental aptitude, it bodes well for them if they do to try and avoid battle if they can. But if they do, they feel well versed in their decision to do so, right? It's not even just, oh, I'm going to kill it because it moves. It's, I'm going to kill it because it doesn't follow Lulth, or I'm going to kill it because it threatened my friend, or,
Mhm.
you know, like they have reason and action behind what they're doing, right?
Mhm.
All right. Exploration. Peps.
So all of the drow can do the levitate on themselves that I've seen so far, right? And like that always intrigues me. And thinking about these as an army, because like there's going to be an army of them. You're not going to come across just one usually unless they're on like a scouting mission. Like, can you imagine going up against an army and then a command is shouted and they all levitate at the same
Mhm.
time?
I feel like they would be synchronized, you know?
Yes. Like
It's
there would be a very specific command and they would hold that like ability until that command is called and the entire army would float
Oh God.
all at
How
once.
fucking, but and it would be a statement of power, right? Is what it
Yes.
is.
Yeah.
Right. So I feel like if you were to go to a training ground, and again, I'm like, we're channeling Mulan into this one. You go to a place where they're all doing their training. They're in the field in their exact rows and lines. Also, like the Salit in their lines.
Yeah.
And then they're just standing there in their training, their levitation. Like
Mhm.
they have to do that every morning for 30 minutes. It's like their meditation. They just do levitate for a certain period of time, and then they do their morning warm-ups, right?
Yeah.
Like
But especially since they're like slightly shorter than the average human, like you said, as a show of power, like we don't care that we're shorter than you. Like,
I'm taller than you, yeah. What are you
yeah,
gonna do?
they just float above them all.
Never underestimate the short king.
Yeah. And they could just float out like above your army and shoot down with their hand bow.
Yeah, man. Like, why not?
Yeah, which also kind of goes into the combat, but
Yeah, exactly.
like,
But like in terms of exploration on my end, I like going to the idea of where their training grounds are. That's kind of the theme that I'm hitting here. And it seems strange that when we talked about Drow cities, they're very condensed, lavish, beautiful households that these Drow live in. And the whole thing is that they're supposed to be beautiful homes to show their status. So where do all of them train? You know, like where does all of this happen? I feel like it happens on the surface at night. So that is probably going to be one of like a good first introduction to Drow, is you're wandering through the night and you decided not to camp. You're going to walk through the night kind of thing. And then you hit a field and there's just 100 Drow in their levitate. They're in their rows because they're training at night on the surface, right? But then it would be an excellent power status if you have enough land in the Underdark that you have a plot of land where your specific group can train for your house's army, right? And I'm assuming that they might have like their own little like sleeping quarters in terms of like the army's quarters and like their own little mess hall and like their own space. Like that would be a thing of status and power if you have that in your household. So if you're exploring and running into a Drow household and you look out the window of like one of their like turrets and you see a whole army in their backyard just training, they're probably one of the higher households, right?
Yeah.
So
interesting. Yeah. And I like they're skilled in perception and stealth. And like, I think this is perhaps one army you would not hear coming. Like, you know, you would not hear or feel the ground shaking and like that the army is getting closer and closer of like, you know, stomping troops. And like the large animals, if they had the lizards or the giant geckos, they would not actually make any sounds when they are moving across. And I think that would be one thing to really indicate you are not dealing with just regular humans, obviously not dwarves or anything. Before you see them, if you can hear the army coming, you know it's not Drow because you will never hear the Drow army coming.
Yeah. Well, I mean, they're levitating and floating towards you. You know?
Yeah.
You do capes billowing in the wind. That's what you would hear.
And yeah, like if there was anything that they could set a trap for them to make sound, or they had to traverse across a river or something, and people are like, there's a river, the army can never cross the river, and then you stare and see this drow army just levitate and move across the river and then keep on going, it's like, well, shit.
It would be interesting if you were trying to track, like if you were in like a whole, like a battle D&D kind of thing, and your group was looking for the like the drow army that's on the surface and or in the Underdark, you won't find tracks.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Like, don't get me wrong, the levitate is a very simple spell. We're giving it a little bit more power than it actually has in this instance. But I feel how thematic that would be, that if your specific battlement house had the ability to levitate and float and do all of these things so that they didn't leave tracks behind, right? And they were quick and they were quiet and they're so roguish, and that's the reputation you get. And so if you're trying to track them, it would be so hard because they don't leave anything behind, right?
Yeah.
All right, combat.
Yeah, they're like a mix of a rogue and like a battle master fighter, you know? So like I would look at those two classes and like just the lore and traits and features and that of them to really combine those into a battle. And like we said, like you're not going to see them coming. I like the idea of them just because they're gonna come at night, especially if you're above surface. You're not like they're not gonna come during the day like you expect any other army to come. They're gonna come at night, and they're just gonna like. I like the idea of them levitating over your camp, and then you just like wake up and they're above you, you know. And it's that very like silent, deadly, roguish, but then they land, and it's all battle master.
Oh yeah, when the sword is drawn, like you're fucked.
Yeah. Like they'll be sneaky until you see them, and then it's over. Like quick.
Yeah, I can just see them like all trying to land lightly, and then there's one that accidentally steps on a twig and it goes and then all of them just kind of like all like side eye each other, and then they all just draw their swords because they're just like, we've been heard, we've been seen. Like
yeah.
But yeah, I feel like from a battle tactics, they would never go anywhere alone.
No.
I feel like in their system, even though it's not written, this is Megan lore, that they have little like pods that if they travel together. And if you're out and about, you're out and about together. If you're eating together. Like you have your squad that is yours. And then so you will never find one alone. If you find one alone, it's probably been removed from its household.
Mm-hmm.
And that would be a good storyline to go down, being like, where's your squad? And then you have a lot of pride in your squad, right? So just because a lot of their battle tactics, especially with the captain, is like built to be together as a group. So for any of those good chains and loops to pop off, you need more than one with you. So I think like the biggest, scariest danger of these is when you do find a group of them, because they are well-oiled machines, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so when you're DMing and having to do the battle tactics in terms of like having a squad of these with you, that's something to keep in mind, is that they wouldn't really stray far away from each other on the battlefield. They're very close quartered fighters. They'll use their arrows for as long as they can, and then when they can't, they draw their swords and they move forward together, right? Kind of like a wave. So that's how I picture it anyways.
Yeah. And I think if you're trying to, like, they have an AC of 18, and then they have a reaction they can do to make it 21. So they are not going to be easy to hit. So I think if you're fighting them, your strategy for it will be to use your spellcasters to try and like debuff them and like take some points off of their AC. But because of the house captain and how they are trained in strategy, I think the house captain could also carve off a chunk of their army when they notice that a spellcaster that is being like in the back of the fight is doing shit. It's going to go, you get that one. And then they are going to, no questions asked, carve off and go and try and take your spellcaster out because it's debuffing the army. So I think that is not above them to, well, the house captain would have the knowledge to point that out because they're up on their lizard and they can see what's going on, and then direct like pieces of their army to go after you. So I don't think you could sit pretty in the back and, just send out your spells to try and give your barbarians and your monks the advantage. That won't work in this case because they will see it and they will strategize and go after you pretty quick. Very scary.
Mhm.
Yeah. And again, they have one reason for living, right? So that's what makes them even more scary, is that their whole reason for existing is worshiping wealth and protecting their house.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're doing anything against either of those things, you're going to have to fight them. There will be no diplomats. It'll just be like, oh, no, you're dead. So be very, very afraid. All right, I'm going to move on to one of our last ones. It's going to be a little bit of a different one. This is the Drow Gunslinger. So these folks are found within the Waterdeep Dragon Heist module. Basically, even though firearms are not necessarily as common as we like to think within D&D, there are members of the Bregan Darthe that carry pistols with bullets and smoke powder, and they are experts with pistols in the same sense that an archer would be fantastic with a bow. And so we did speak about the Bregan Darthe, I'm pretty sure, pretty shortly in some of the lore in the previous episodes. But just in case, basically it is the Drow mercantile band led by a male Drow called Draxel. I'll get into a little bit more lore about that because we're going to talk about some of the 3 main gunslingers that you'll find within this module. But I'm going to hit you with the stats before I do. So, because it kind of ties in together the fact that they are expert pistol wielders. So they are armored, heavily armored, with an AC of 18, medium hit points around the 70 to 80 mark, so similar to some of the ones we're seeing today, and a speed of 30. They're above average in all stats, but their highest is Dex, which checks out for Drow, as well as because they are a roguelike entity, is kind of how they're written in this sense. They're skilled in perception and stealth, their stealth being at a +8. Their dark vision is 120 feet, so they have that average, and they speak both Elvish and Undercommon, and this makes them a CR of 4. So one of the lower ones that we're talking about today, but when I get into how deadly they can be, I'll let you know. So for abilities, of course, they have the classic Fey ancestry, sunlight sensitivity as Drow do. They're also classic charisma-based spellcasters with the same classic spells of dancing lights, fairy fire, etc., and the levitate also. But they have something called Gunslinger. This is what makes them different, which means that if they're within 5 feet of someone that they're attacking, it doesn't give them disadvantage on a ranged attack. So you know how like if you're like point blank bow and arrowing somebody in the face, it's technically disadvantage for you because it's supposed to be a ranged attack. So you have to kind of step back. They can point a gun at your face and shoot you. Like they can point blank in, no problem. But it also applies to long range. So even at that longest range, it doesn't apply to disadvantage. They just get regular rolls no matter how that distance is, right? As well as they ignore half and 3/4 cover when firing with their pistol. So
they are a sniper.
Correct.
Like they don't nothing phases their aim.
Yeah. No. If you are in their sights, they will hit you and they will shoot you. So, and it's quite frightening to me, I'm just gonna say. So yeah, they have a multi-attack with 2 short sword attacks as well. So they do carry a short sword, but then their pistol is also poisonous. So it's a ranged attack of +6 to hit. The range is 30 to 90 feet. And then it is 1d10 +4 piercing plus 2d10 poison damage.
Of course, the bullets are poisoned.
Correct. So that's why I was like, it's important to note that no matter what weapon we're using, it might be poisonous.
It's probably poison.
It might be poison. So they're poison bullets. But if you get in close range, they do also have a sword. So, because they do, a lot of them, if you actually read it, it does have like, especially some of the specific ones, will have a certain amount of bullets and a certain amount of powder. So they're not unlimited. So they do have a secondary short sword for if they need to switch and actually fight someone in close combat. So knowing all this, there's some neato lore within the Dragon Heist book on the 3 main gunslinging Drow. There is Felrecht, a female-born Drow who disliked the treatment of men in their society, so transitioned into a man and joined the Bregan Darthe.
Whoa.
Yep.
Interesting.
Draxel, the leader, took them in with open arms, and Felrecht became their most trusted lieutenant who is eager to prove themselves and signs up for any mission they can, and is also known for being the most compassionate and actually doesn't kill unless it is specifically for survival or given a reason to do so. I'm like, thanks for that. Thanks for that touching, compassionate moment. Their best friend, who they joke and hang around with all the time, is Krebig Mascaliri. Krebig's story is that their house was destroyed, so they have absolutely no ties to Drow society. And even though Felrecht and them get along like a house fire, like their relationship is very written like comedic tit for tat. Is like, it's, you know, like almost like enemies to lovers kind of like tit for tat feel is kind of how I read it when I read their lore. They are the opposite spectrum of what's God, my words? Finding new words today, Megan. Just stick to your script. Their alignment is opposite spectrum. So Krebig is very much more brutal and tactile and will fight and will kill. Whereas Felrect is just like, no, not if we don't have to. So I can imagine from a role-playing aspect, that would be a fun thing to play at the table. And lastly, there is Saloon Zibrandis. They are the worst of the three. In fact, has a deep-seated hatred for surface elves and even half-elves, to the point that when they are not on missions, they just walk the streets of Waterdeep by means to pick off any unsuspecting elves. They're slightly different as well from a visual standpoint, whereas normally Drow will carry short swords, bows, all that kind of stuff. These ones have their pistols. Yes, that makes them different. But they actually also carry around a scimitar as their sword. Instead of a short sword, it's specifically a scimitar. So recognizable in my mind that if you see a weird, creepy male drow wandering the streets of Waterdeep with a scimitar, and you are of any kind of elvish like allegiance on the surface, you will be killed.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just announcing it is like oh my god, words. A reaper.
It's the time change. None of us can words today.
Yeah.
Well, and I just finished playing Silent Hill 2, the remake, and like all I can think in my head is like Pyramid Head with the dragging the giant broadsword behind him across the ground, so you can hear it dragging behind you, so you can hear it coming up, and I'm like, I'm going way too horror-esque with this, but I'm enjoying the visual of that. That it's just like running its scimitar across the sides of buildings as it's walking down the street, so you can actually hear him coming, because he doesn't care, right?
Yeah.
Like, he's roguish and he can sneak if he wants to, but because of how brutal and confrontational he is, I don't think that he would. I think that he would just walk right up to you and be like, I don't like you, and will then start trying to fight you. So,
I don't like you. Stab, stab, stab.
correct. All right, let's roll some dice and talk about either
All
just like gunslingers as a whole mixed in with a little bit of this lore if you feel like it.
7.
17.
17.
Casey,
Gotta
okay.
roll.
3.
Oh, 5.
You nailed it. All right, well, you're first then, friendo.
Oh, geez, the pressure.
So role playing.
Okay.
So
well,
I'd say like pick anywhere from like if you want to talk about the gunslingers as a whole, or if you want to talk about the 3, you can talk about the 3.
yeah. Okay. I think these ones are gonna look so cool as fuck. Like their guns are going to be, they're gonna have like beautiful metal like etchings. There's going to be all this cool stuff going on with them. They're going to be walking around with them visible like in their holsters. And I think you would role play them as the most arrogant shits ever, but they also like don't actually do much negotiation or discussion. Like they're still just killing machines, but they just have this like suave charisma. I'm like going back to like your arrogant cowboy in like the Wild West. That's what I'm imagining for these ones. But
I had put on the fedora and said "milady." That is what I was imagining when you were describing, which is I feel 2 very different feelings.
Yeah, and I have always been intrigued by like the guns and that whole piece in D&D because it doesn't come up often, and I'm too into. I think I don't know if Adam would. I'd be like, "Can I be a guns?" He's like, "No."
Yeah, we're not introducing that into here. Stop it. Yeah.
He's like, "Don't do it. It's too much to track. Just stop." And I'll be like, "Okay."
Yeah. Well, we have that conversation with L5R all the time too. Like guns technically don't exist, but there is black powder and people that have guns in our world that we developed because Roman added it in. And then eventually he eventually regretted it because like it was just such a it's a weird, not necessarily overpowered, because they did kind of balance it out in terms of there will always be a limit to how much ammo you have. You always have it's almost like spell casting. You have to have the components. It's not like you just have a sword that you can stab with and it's easy, but it's still such a strange, weird dynamic to add in. So that's why I feel like they were very specific to say it's a very special group of folk that do this, right?
Yeah.
So
yeah.
See,
And sorry,
I was just
go ahead.
I was just gonna say I have a DM who their rule is if you have it, then the world has it. So if you create firearms, then it is fair game for any NPC. So keep that in mind. Technology always gets out.
Yeah, we have that rule at Adam's table, and we have that rule in our L5R group too. That if you can do it, someone else can. Like,
Yeah.
so
Like if you create the technology, somebody's watching you.
yeah, exactly. Right.
Yeah, like I just imagine this could be like in a one shot even. This could be your like your assassin that you're hunting, or your assassin for hire that the drows go to when they need a specific person and a specific mark to be taken out. They send this one. And there is like some elite warriors that go along with it, but this is the one that, takes you out from like from 90 feet away before you even realize you're being hunted.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, and I do agree with Casey on my end. I do feel like they would be arrogant and pompous about it because they know that they can outgun your bow and arrow.
Yeah.
Like, you know what I mean? So they're going to look at your bow and arrow and almost look down at you. And there would always be that little like level of arrogance to them. And I also imagine them carrying their pistol around in a suitcase. I'm sorry, I'm getting into like a an Agent 47 hitman kind of feel here. But like in terms of role playing for like a one shot or something I would want to play, I would actually want 3 people that I would play each one of these characters and play a mission out. And like I would DM it, and then I'd have 3 people at my table. Each one plays one of the 3 gunslingers, because they're all varying degrees of alignment. And we don't use alignment as much as we should in D&D, just to minimize the amount of conflict at the table. Like, unless it is a personality trait is when we use it, less like an actual thing to confront people about. So it would have to be with very specific people that had a good ability to at the table have that kind of conflict between each other without it becoming problematic in real life. I would want to do that, because I think there's such well-defined characters with good backstories and good interaction opportunities that I would want to role play out that one shot of them just doing a mission together.
that would be so fun.
Right? What about you, Peps?
It might be because I've done Waterdeep and I've met Jarlaxle. I see them as more pirates than cowboys.
Oh.
In one of my games, Jarlaxle actually ended up being my father.
Of course. Of course.
So that was a whole thing. But yeah, I would play them more piratey, especially like when you think about like a pirate crew and like these all together, like making up just this odd mishmash of personalities. Like, I think that's very like pirate ship kind of dynamics, because you just get like the random misfits of society that join this crew for whatever reason in their life.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's how I would more so role play them.
Yeah, especially coming from Waterdeep, it like makes sense that they would be pirate-esque, and like even if they're on a ship, they would be below deck all the time. You know what I mean? Out of the sunlight, and then come up at night, right? So, anyways, I think that's neat. Exploration, Casey.
Well, I think they would be again really, really hard to track, and I love the idea of like the trio that you're role playing those 3 characters as like a trio out in the world. Like, it wouldn't take much for you to cover your tracks. And I think with especially just using the weapon, the guns, they're skilled in perception and stealth still. So again, like, think sniper. You are going to likely get hit by a bullet before you even realize that they're attacking you. And that's a benefit if you are playing them, but it's actually very terrifying if you're being hunted by them, because there's 3 of them and they all have guns. So that's 3 hits you're going to get in your party before you even realize you're in a fight. And I think there's always going to be surprise attacks, like no matter what, when these creatures like initiate a combat with you, because you just can't.
Yeah, I would love, like, I found like a good way to introduce them to from an exploration tactic would be you're coming up to a town, or if you're playing in Waterdeep and you're wandering through, you come across a small group of folks that clearly were either robbed or XYZ, but one of them has a bullet wound. And it's a wound you've never seen before. You're like, what made this hole in your body? What is this, like, what is this shrapnel that's in your skin, so on and so forth. And then they give you a little bit of the lore of the gunslingers, and that they're afoot and they're about, and to be careful because they're pretty sneaky and so on and so forth, right? But then that if once you learn a little bit more of them, it might be that the person that you found down that was injured actually had a hit put out on them, and they're not necessarily good. They actually, you know, but I think that's a good way of like introducing that bullets exist without you getting shot by one first.
Yeah.
So, so yeah. What about you, Peps?
I think, especially with the one who like likes to off elves
Mm-hmm.
as they see them, I think there'd be a lot of like rumors around these. Like as you're wandering through Waterdeep, you'll see missing signs, you know, and it'll be a lot of elves on these missing posters, like specifically. And you'll hear rumors of like, don't be out after dark at the docks. And, you know, if anybody sees your elf ears, like if you go to a tavern, they'll be like, make sure you're inside at this time.
Yeah.
It's not safe out there. So I would like really look into the rumors and like the whisperings you'd hear during the day, because they're not going to be out during the day. And really just taking into account all of that, because people are going to know, but they're going to be in this part of Waterdeep where nobody's going to do anything about it.
Correct. Yeah, it's not like you can go to the authorities and be like, I got attacked by this man in the streets. And they'd be like, well, you probably did something wrong, so
Yeah.
I'm not helping
Don't
you.
be out after midnight. I don't know what to tell you.
Yeah. We said go home before it gets dark. The street lights
Yeah.
went out and you were still outside. What do you want me to do about that?
Yeah. That's on you.
Oh my goodness. All right. And lastly, in terms of combat, Casey.
Well, I'm going to jump ahead to if you are able to actually kill one of these and you're going to loot them. Similarly to if you are able to defeat the house captain and you keep their helmet. Imagine if you get their guns after you defeat them, and that again is just an unspoken, or it speaks volumes by where you go and who sees that you have these guns. They know exactly which gunslingers those guns are, and they're going, I heard rumors that they were killed, but I couldn't imagine who did it. And then it's like your party, or like your fighter who then multi-classes to start doing some gunslinger shit, because now they have these amazing weapons. So I think that would be a cool aspect to perhaps even introduce that to your party, for somebody to figure out, okay, well, these are cool as fuck. I want to use them now. And it's going to be a piece of, again, intimidation or persuasion as we move through Drow areas, because people know who these used to belong to, and they belong to me now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, for sure. I like, from a combat perspective, I know that they would probably want to show off their skill in terms of their pistol usage. You know what I mean? So I feel like there's a part of me that wants it to be slow and methodical the way a sniper would handle a pistol, but I also know that combat is super fast and quick, right?
Mm-hmm.
And because they're pompous about it, they want you to see that they're aiming at you. So from a combat perspective, I don't think from the way I imagine it, I don't think they would necessarily be sneaky if they don't have to be. They'll make themselves known just long enough to all of a sudden see a bullet go between your eyes, kind of thing. Like they want you to see that you're the one that did it, because in my mind, that arrogance is just a part of it, right? So they would definitely be doing things from a long distance, and because that would be a challenge for them. The longer the distance is, the better it can be, right? Because I feel that if I had one of these at my table or we're playing it, even though they do have a max distance, as opposed to like it trigger their disadvantage, if you want to go above that, I would let you do it with disadvantage and just see if it hit, you know. But yeah, I do like the fact that they have swords that if they end up being close combat, they can do it. But the point blank gunfire to the head just sounds like a really fun thing to display at some point to kill your beloved NPC.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Trauma inducing.
Yeah, absolutely. What about you, Peps?
I find the most interesting one is the one who is not into combat, because with all Drow, they're very heavily combative and they're all like very quick to fight and hit. So like thinking about what would drive that one to combat, or how they would talk their way out of combat. Or just use their skills to get you to calm down, like shooting the thing directly next to you, because they are still a really great shot.
Mm-hmm.
So like you start a fight and they shoot just at your toes, like just barely missing your shoe, and be like, you might want to settle down there because the next one's not gonna miss.
It's like, yeah, you're gonna want to relax there, bud.
Yeah, you're gonna want to take a seat. So like I would definitely think about that one, because I mean the one is going to be very quick to hit, but like what is the one going to do to not fight?
Yeah.
How are they going to use other methods?
Yeah. And it's also neat to point out at that point that, like, as a reminder, their AC is high. They have an AC of 18. So they are guarded. They are stacked in terms of if they do have to get into close combat, they can. But I also feel like they almost figured out what kind of armor would help with stopping bullets from others. And that's why they wear almost like bulletproof vest, if that makes sense. It kind of gives that little bit of like a reason as to why they have it. But usually when you see a ranged character like that, especially from just a player perspective, you would think that once you got up close, they would be squishy because they're only wearing padded looking armor. But it's actually hard to hit them when you get up close because they're wearing like padded bulletproof armor. So your sword also is not as effective as your arrows are, kind of thing, right? So that's kind of a cool combative reveal too, is that just because they're a ranged character does not mean they're squishy the way that you think they would be. So
yeah. I would also give them flavor in if they had to do an unarmed strike against you, it would be with the butt of their gun because they ran out of bullets. Just to add some more arrogant shade to that.
So funny.
Or they just strap their sword to the front like a bayonet.
Oh yeah.
Little stabby stab.
Yeah.
Amazing. All right, well, that is the Gunslinger. So before we wrap up this episode, let's talk about one last little minion.
Yeah. So I am gonna chat a little bit about the giant flying spiders. These use the giant spider stats, but to make them even scarier, they now have wings.
And I'm out.
Yep. And a fly speed of 40 feet, which gives them 3 different movements, with walking and climbing as well. I mean, the only thing that makes spiders scarier is spiders with giant wings. They fly around the caverns and make webs atop the zirkwood mushrooms. They get pretty much what you would think a spider gets. They have spider climb, spider sense, and web walking. They can do 1 bite attack that does piercing damage and the chance to do poison damage. If the poison damage reduces the target to 0 hit points, they are now poisoned for 1 hour and is paralyzed while poisoned. They also get a web attack that is a recharge on 5 and 6 and can restrain a target hit by it. So they'll restrain you, they'll bite you, they'll poison you, and they can fly.
No thanks.
Yep.
Hard pass. Oh my god. All right. We don't have to roll for initiative on this one. I would just say, like, let's chat. Like, what's one interesting or unique way that you would use these minions in your Drow campaign?
So being me, and them specifically mentioning mushrooms, I would combine these with deep dragons because they have the spore breath weapon and their whole layer is mushrooms, and so I would have them as part of like the deep dragons layer and minion area as well.
That's really cute and really cool. I like the idea because we were talking earlier about how, like, even in my mind, in my vision, when you're training your warriors for your household, they're on the surface at nighttime. I imagine that the field in which you're training, that's surrounded maybe by a tree line, that whole tree line is surrounded by these, so that they can see what's going on, and then they can like jump far distances to be able to protect the group if they're not paying attention, right? Because they're focusing in on their training. So if they get attacked, they want this minion here to kind of like make a lot of noise and still be silent so that they can take out anything on the outsides that might disturb them. It's kind of how I wanted to connect it to like what we talked about today. But I like your dragons idea. That's really cute.
Yeah. I mean, cute and also like horrifically terrifying. Like, can you imagine you are trying to find this dragon, but you come across flying spider, giant flying spiders first?
Yeah. They're not just regular flying spiders, they're giant flying spiders.
Yeah.
And I could see this being like where the Drow collect them for their minions.
You're right.
Like they have to go on a mission to this deep dragon to get these spiders because that's where they live, is amongst these mushrooms that the dragon.
Oh, boy.
And then what do deep dragons hoard? Like, what would they trade their spiders for?
Deep dragons are interesting because they don't really fight other dragons. They see all dragons as being above everybody else.
Okay.
So like you would have to have some piece of dragon history or something. Or they would want to know like stories of up above, which would be hard for a drow to give. Like they would have to very specifically go on a mission to get something from the above world to bring the dragon.
Yeah.
And
'Cause
like
that,
even
yeah.
better if it's from a dragon's lair.
Because that might be a good like ecosystem loop
Mhm.
of a raid will go to find information for the dragons so that they can get access to more of these spiders to help build up their armies and so on and so forth in the name of wealth, right?
Yeah.
So, and then like that would be a good, if you're playing a drow campaign, a great reason to go to the surface, right? Which is
Mhm.
what we're always trying to find. That's something different other than a raid. This would be a good reason to head up there, right?
Yeah. I also instantly thought of like these being the equivalent to a gargoyle. And so like in your drow city that you're going into, you know, you're trying to find like say there was a noble house that actually they got wiped out. And so now it's an abandoned mansion. And these would be the ones where the giant flying spiders are perched and they look like gargoyles, and you think that they're just part of the architecture,
The
and
aesthetic.
yeah, and they never left because it was ingrained in them to protect this mansion, but even though the family's gone, they still remain, and that's where they are. And like once you get into proximity, you trigger them and then they start moving, and super creaky because gargoyles are like notorious for, is it a gargoyle or is it a statue? And I think this is the gargoyle of the drow, like Underdark.
Yeah,
Mhm.
that's really cool. I like that. Awesome.
Yeah, I think so. I think what we've learned today is that watch pop culture. If
Yeah.
you're doing a drow episode or a drow campaign.
It's a constant theme that we can put drow into any of our pop culture realms. Yeah.
Yeah. Specifically look at the armies of these things and the politics of these shows.
Mhm.
And I think that then you get drow.
And
Yeah.
don't forget about poison at any
Yeah.
moment in
Any
anything.
moment. Yeah.
Anything can be poisoned if you're a drow.
Yeah.
Well,
I
that's
do.
all for this discussion on Drow in D&D 5th edition. Please take a second to engage with a like, follow, comment, and review to help push our engagement. And don't forget to subscribe to find future inspirations for your campaigns.
If you'd like to support us, we have a store with some merch and a donate button on our website, itsamimic.com, as well as a Patreon. This episode and others can also be found on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, and most other podcast apps. Thanks for listening to It's a Mimic, where you never know what you're going to get.
Thank you.